make even more games and stuff like that. So here we are. Favorite son. This is a book. I was actually commissioned to write this 25 years ago by Chelsea House Publishers. They were doing a series of books on all of the presidents. And the dean of the College of Education got wind of it and recommended me, because he knew I came from the McKinley Memorial and had a big interest in President McKinley. And so they commissioned me to write this book. And they paid me $2,000 for the manuscript. And then they published the first 4 series, the first 4 books and the first 4 presidents, and then they stopped. And they decided they were going to do pop figures instead. The first book in that series was Michael Jackson. And so they let me keep the advance money, but the prize I would not do anything with it for 5 years in case they changed their minds. Well, that 5 years came and went. I got more busy in teaching at YSU, and then I finally retired. COVID came and went, and I said, I got to get this thing done. So I rewrote it so it's not just for young adults. It's now for anybody, and I put back all this local history stuff that I really wanted to emphasize that publisher wasn't interested in at all. So it's the way I want it. So here we are. So favorite son. Well, we're going to do it the old-fashioned way. I'm not going to read this to you. I mean, you can do that. But McKinley was born in Niles, Ohio. He was the 7th of 9 children. It's January 29th, 1843. In fact, his father, when he found out when William was born, he went exclaiming through the streets, "Lucky 7, lucky 7," and passing out cigars. And that was kind of prophetic. He was, his other siblings, got a lot up here, but not all of it. His oldest brother was David, then it was Anna, then next was James, then it was Mary, then it was Helen, Sarah, William, his younger brother Abner, which those two you would swear they were almost twins when they grew up. In fact, when I worked at the McKinley Memorial, I would be getting a lot of photographs people would bring in for me to verify. And I found a photograph of William McKinley, and it's, well, no, that's Abner in a boat in Havana Harbor in 1900. I mean, in 1904. That's not William. And then his youngest sister, Abigail. The Abigail died in infancy, and she is the only one that's buried in Niles. All the others are buried in Canton. He went to a little white one-room schoolhouse in Niles. And that's what they call it, a little white one-room schoolhouse, wood clapboard building, and became very, very, very close friends with another boy who was 3 years older than him, Joseph G. Butler Jr. And those two could be seen everywhere, running around, doing errands, playing, getting into trouble sometimes. But those two were close. They lifelong friendship. And there's almost it's a wonderful life kind of episode in their friendship. In 1853, William and Joseph go swimming in the creek that feeds into the Mahoney River, and he almost drowned. And a worker at the Ward Iron Company, Jacob Sheeler, he jumped in and saved them. So one can just imagine if Jacob hadn't been there and was able to intervene and save them, how things would have been so different. And this is Joseph here, Joseph G. Butler Jr. That's his younger brother Irwin behind him. In 1852, the McKinley family starts to move out of Niles. They move to Poland. Now that's according to the Poland records. They say 1852. William, though, doesn't really move there until 1854 because of the friendship with Joseph. Joseph, the McKinley family has moved to Poland because they've exhausted the educational facilities of that little white one-room schoolhouse. And they wanted more education for their children. And so the only other place you could go at that time in the early 1850s was the Poland Seminary Academy. And it's called the Poland Seminary Academy not because they're training priests and bishops and ministers. It's all schools were called that went beyond that 6th to 8th grade level, or 4th to 6th grade level, because they were teaching the sedimentary aspects of a profession. They were hoping that William would become a preacher. Anna would go on to become a teacher, and William was very good at speaking. He loved speech and debate classes. He loved writing. Debate. He loved arithmetic. He wasn't so good in terms of writing. He never was a big writer. But he did not move fully to Poland until 1854. And the Butler says this over and over again. And there's nothing I could find to actually prove that. But except what Butler's saying in his books, and he writes many, many books. And it's like 7 different works. He says McKinley and he were together until 1854. And I kind of suspect, and I can read between the lines, because Joseph G. Butler's grandfather lived in Pittsburgh. And twice a month, he would walk from Pittsburgh to Niles. Walk. You could do that. And you go right through Poland to do that. So I strongly suspect that Joseph G. Butler's grandpa picked up William in Poland, walked with him to Niles, and then walked him back to Poland on his way back to Pittsburgh. And that's how they continued their friendship. And that's why William was in Niles in 1853, almost drowning with his buddy, and not in Poland. That's what we're going to go with, 1854. That's what I go, because Butler, to me, is the authority. He graduates from the Poland Seminary Academy in 1859. He becomes a teacher. He goes off to enroll. Before he becomes a teacher, he goes off and enrolls in college, and but immediately, even before the first term is over, it's the first occasion we know in the historical record he gets sick. And he gets very, very sick. So he's dismissed, he leaves school, he goes home to convalesce, and he gets a job teaching part-time in the schools around here, south end of Poland. Probably not, if there was one around here, probably not far from here either, in Fairfield or maybe even Petersburg. And then he helps work in the post office in Poland. And it's in 1861, April 1861, Civil War breaks out. And William enlists in the 23rd Ohio Volunteer Infantry Regiment, goes in as a private. And he, the 23rd Ohio is made part of General William Henry Harrison's division. And eventually will be part of General Cook's 12th Corps. And William it doesn't take long for General Hayes to realize that William's got a lot between the ears up here. And he becomes basically the commissary sergeant within weeks of leading boot camp. And this is a pretty hefty assignment. The commissary sergeant of his unit, of any unit, they're responsible, personally responsible, for all the food, all the fodder, all the tools, all the equipment, all the ammunition, all the weapons of that unit. And if there's a shortfall in any of that, it comes out of the commissary sergeant's pocket. William never failed in audit. He was very responsible, kept excellent books. And before he knows it, he's on General Hayes' staff. But between then and now, that promotion to commissary sergeant and the next one is the Battle of Antietam. September 17th, 1862. And that is the bloodiest day in U.S. military history, ever. It was bloodier with all the deaths and injuries on that battlefield for both sides. They're all Americans. No battlefield in World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam has come close. It would be like crashing a fully loaded Boeing 747 into the Southern Park Mall every hour for 24 hours to get that kind of violence and horror that was at Antietam. Many times, William leads the wagons with ammunition, food, water, and it's horribly hot. It was in the 90 degrees with humidity to match that day. Under fire to take those things to the men in the front lines. Horses were killed. He has to cut them out of the traces, go back, get more horses, hook them up under enemy fire, get them to the men, evacuate the wounded, and he does this at least a dozen times. He's mentioned in dispatches about the battle to President Lincoln. And when the battle's over, he's promoted to lieutenant. And he's given leave to go home for Christmas. This is his, go back. This is a picture of him taken while he was home in Poland, in his new lieutenant's uniform with the officer's bars on his epaulets on his shoulders. By the war end, he's promoted to major, and he's in command of the 23rd Ohio. At the one of the last battles he fights in, it's in Opequon Creek, and he and Rutherford B. Hayes, side by side, lead a charge of 500 picked men, their best men, through a swamp to turn the Confederate flank. And I can just imagine these guys went through swamp, muck and mire up to some pit up to here, and they came out of that covered with filth and mud, and they just started screaming like banshees. And it thoroughly terrified the Stonewall Brigade. The elite brigade of the Confederate Army broke and ran. The Confederate commander, when he surrendered, he says, "Who were those devils?" And they got the nickname Crook's Devils, from General Crook's 12th Corps for that. When the war is over, a few months later, he's offered a permanent commission in the Army. Others are being discharged, sent home by the hundreds of thousands. They want out. William said, "I want out too. I've had enough." It's amazing, during that whole war, he's never wounded, never on the sick list, never reported off for duty even 1 hour. So, it's an amazing service record. And he decides he's going to come home, and Rutherford B. Hayes was a lawyer before the war. And that's what William wants to do now. No more thoughts of being a preacher, I'm not going to be a teacher like my older sister. No, I want to be a lawyer. He comes back to Youngstown. He sets up he gets initial practice under lawyer Judge Glidden, and then he goes off and he studies law at Albany, and he passes the bar exam. And he returns to Ohio, but he doesn't go to Youngstown or Poland or Niles. He goes to Canton. He goes to Canton because the McKinley family now is all reuniting there. Anna has just been, that year, has just received a promotion to be the very first female principal of any school in the United States of America, in Canton. And Abner and his dad are back. They have gone out to California with the gold rush. They didn't make any gold. They didn't go out there to look for gold. They went out there to sell the tools that the miners would need. The pickaxes, the shovels, the wheelbarrows, and stuff like that. They do okay. And they come back home. And Williams setting up his practice there. And in 1867. And he goes in and he's got set up a bank account. And he goes to the biggest bank in Canton. And there he meets the very first female bank clerk in our history. Her name is Ida Saxton. She's there for a reason. The Saxton family were probably the wealthiest family, or one of the wealthiest family in Canton at the time. Or the Timkins may have been more, but they had the biggest bank. And like any other wealthy, well-to-do debutante, when it was her coming out into society, to finish her formal education, they sent her on a European tour. Go see the sights and the museums and stuff like that with the chaperone. And that was all great and fun, but when they get to Paris, I just had enough of the chaperone. She gives her a slip. And she's gone for 3 days. Who knows where? Let's have a good old time, because when she goes back to the hotel, she's grounded. There's a telegram from Dad saying, bring her home now. And so she's back in Canton, and he puts her up in the bank so she can learn how to do work. And that's where they meet. And they fall head over heels in love. Now, I said William didn't write much, but he sure could write nice love letters to Ida. And she wrote many back. And there's many of them that survived. He called her precious, my darling. She called him honey and my major. And they were very quickly, within 6 months, they were engaged and they were married the next year. They had 2 children, Katie and Ida. Katie was born first, and Ida came about 2.5 years later, but she only lived for a few days. She passed away, and that wasn't uncommon back in those days. Infant mortality was much, much, much higher than it is today. A few weeks later, Ida's mother passed away. Just dropped dead of a heart attack. The next week after that, Katie caught typhus and died. Ida McKinley, William's wife, had complete and total nervous breakdown. For the rest of her life, she would suffer from seizures. She couldn't stand the color yellow. It would just send her into fits of rage. And he had to resign his law practice for almost 2 years to take care of her. They moved out of the house they had been renting. They moved back into her parents' house, her father's house, which is now the First Lady's museum. That's in Canton. And after about 2 years, in 1876, William decides he's going to go back to work. And this time he's going to go into politics, not just the law. He had been very successful in the law. He established his reputation very quickly. One of his first cases was to defend striking mine workers who, in the strike, there were some people who were killed. Scab workers were attempting to cross the picket lines. Fights broke out. Three people were killed. The police arrested 10 strikers and charged them with murder. And William had to defend them. Was given the job to defend them. The mine company was owned by a person named Marcus Alonzo Hanna out of Cleveland. And he would become the head of the Republican Party. But this is the first time they're crossing paths. McKinley does such a good job in defending these guys, he gets them all but one off. And the one that was found guilty wasn't found guilty of murder, he was found guilty of manslaughter. And he's only sentenced to 3 years. And when the miners who had pulled together all their money for his fee come to give him money, he refuses to take it. You were in the right. I shouldn't be taking money from innocent people. That established his reputation right now. And his clientele list, his law practice takes off. He becomes a partner, but then Ida gets sick. When he comes back in 1876, he's decided he's not going to just become a lawyer and resume his law practice with Judge Day in Canton, probably one of the leading lawyers in Canton at the time. They've become very good friends. He's going to help his friend, former commanding officer Rutherford B. Hayes, run for president. And he's also going to run for Congress. Now we have, thanks to Joseph G. Butler, we have William McKinley's law desk in the museum. And when I started working there, nobody had ever gone through it, really, inspecting it. So I took everything apart, was going through it, and we found this crumpled up letter that had been stuffed in the back of one of the drawers, and it was from Rutherford B. Hayes. In replying to William's letter, apparently, that he was going to help him and he was going to run for Congress. And Rutherford said, "That's great, thank you, but don't go into politics. You're too nice." So that's why he kind of wadded it up, shoved it in the back of the drawer, and forgot about it. So it's in the archives at the McKinley Memorial. He's elected. He becomes congressman. And the big issue for William as congressman is helping to protect the growing industries in Ohio, in his constituency, the pottery, the iron industries in particular, farmers, and later the steel industry. And so he helps get through Congress a series of what they call the McKinley tariffs that are aimed to help protect those industries so they can get started and be able to compete against all the foreign imports, and particularly from England and Germany and France. And they work. The industries in Ohio just take off. And Joseph G. Butler writes glowingly about how these legislation on the part of William McKinley helped put people to work. During this time period, in 1855, Youngstown is a city of about 25,000. By the end of the century, by 1900, it's over 130,000. It doubles in population twice, in 1870 and again in 1880. And this is largely fueled by immigration. People coming from all over the country for opportunities to work and grow and prosper here. And by the end of the century, by 1912, there are 35 miles of iron and steel mills running along both banks of the Mahoning River from Warren to Lowellville. You could walk from one industry to another and never leave a plant. And those were all grown during this time period. In 1890, he's gerrymandered out of his office in politics in 1890. But it's not going to keep him down. In 1890, by this time, he's caught more attention by Marcus Alonzo Hanna. In 1890, William attends the Republican convention, and he helps nominate some people. And there's people who want him to run for president that year. And he repeatedly says, "No, I'm not senior enough. I've not got enough experience." There are people who have done way more than me, who've done a lot more experience than I have. They should be considered before me. Marcus Alonzo Hanna is just standing there listening and says, he turns to his friend and says, "This man bears watching." In 1892, he's elected governor of Ohio. And he immediately, at this point, the legislature is controlled by Democrats, not Republicans. But he is able to get through, he's able to work with everybody, both sides of the aisle. One of the first things he does, he gets passed legislation guaranteeing workers' abilities to form unions. He's the very first governor in our history that receives union leaders into the governor's mansion to sit down and discuss, okay, how can we get this legislation through the State House? How can we make this work? I mean, this is the time. The very next year, in 1893, that's the Homestead Steel Strike. Andrew Carnegie and Henry Clay Frick actually destroy the steelworkers' unions. Everybody in that city evicted. 30,000 people pushed out by Pennsylvania National Guard. He knows what's at stake. He also doesn't stay in Columbus. He's here almost every other week. He's either in Youngstown, he's in Poland, he's in Canton, he goes down to Columbiana. I mean, he's all over there. He's dedicating university, he's down at Mount Union, he's dedicating YMCAs. He loved the YMCA. The Masons, he became a member of the Masons in the Civil War, and because he was very impressed by seeing fellow Masons, regardless of what side they were fighting on, helping each other. And so he joins, he becomes eventually one of the Grand Masters of the Masonic Order. And he's all over them. He comes constantly back home, back to this area to keep in touch with his friends, with people who helped him succeed in life so far. Okay. In 1896, he is nominated for President of the United States. At the it's going to be one of the most colorful presidential campaigns in our history at this point. William McKinley will conduct the last traditional porch front campaign, where candidates didn't run for office, you stood for office. And you would stay home and make speeches from the porch front or from the village square or wherever was best the candidate wanted to do it. But you never left the area you lived in, and that's how you did it. And other agents, other members of the party would go out and campaign for you across the country, and that's what he's going to do. His opponent is William Jennings Bryan, the youngest person ever to have been nominated for the presidency to that point in our history. And he is, if William was a good speaker, this guy, he is a rock star. And he's going to conduct a train whistle-stop tour throughout the entire United States. Visit every single state in the country. You'll come to Ohio like 3 or 4 times, taking McKinley on directly. And so to combat this kind of publicity, McKinley's people come up with a new thing. They're going to put his image, his picture, his slogans on everything. This is the invention of the presidential campaign button. People collect those things now. Those are the gold standard. Getting those McKinley 1896 buttons. But they put them on all sorts of, the straw hats with the bands, they have McKinley. And Garrett Hobart. Garrett Hobart was his running mate. He was from New Jersey. He was a politician from New Jersey, but he was a banker. And he was a deliberate choice by McKinley for vice president because he was a banker. The economy was #1. By 1896, the rift between the rich and the poor was astronomical. You had people who were living in horrid tenements in the cities, toiling away in these factories, making maybe a 5 cents an hour, and you have millionaires, building huge palatial estates and mansions like feudal lords, and it was just obscene, the division in our economy, and that's not sustainable. And So that's the number one issue. The railroad rates, the rail barons were jacking up the rates of their for freight cars and through the roof, so farmers could hardly. They were losing money with their crops. They couldn't afford to send their crops to the markets because the rail barons were taking all the profits. So it was this kind of thing. And when William Jennings Bryan gives his acceptance speech at the Democratic Convention, it's still enshrined as one of the most epic speeches ever given. He says at its climax, you will not nail us to a cross of gold. Wealth has to be shared, not hoarded. And so this is what he's come up against. And because let's face it, a lot of the people who are supporting him have a lot of money. And so they put, and Williams McKinley's campaign will be the most expensive ever done to that point. So in that day, it totaled by the end of the year, by the time the November elections come around, it's $560-some thousand in 1896. That's like $5 billion today. Unheard of. They made baby dolls out of soap with sashes that said, "My Papa's voting for McKinley." Those are on display. They have some of those. Those have not held up well over the years, but they do have some of those at the McKinley Memorial. Umbrellas, parasols, sashes, all sorts of stuff. If you are into collecting McKinley stuff, you've got a ton of things to look for. You're in a shopper's paradise. And when it all comes in, William McKinley it does win the 1896 election. And it's pretty much on north-south lines. States of the former Confederacy stick with the Democrats. The states that were in the Union and out west voted for McKinley. And when he comes in, and this is William McKinley being sworn. And no, this is not a colorized photo. His inauguration was the very first one to be recorded using color photography. Thomas Alva Edison had just perfected the technology. Very expensive. And this was the first public use of it. The application of it was this inauguration. So he starts off reorganizing the presidency. Not just he's a consensus style leader. He does not he's not the decider. He's the president. He's kind of views himself more of like the head coach. And his job is to help get people to help him make sound decisions. So cabinet meetings, decisions weren't made until they were unanimous. He had a consensus. If there was somebody holding out that strongly, okay, we'll table it, move on, and we'll go on to something. You guys can hash it out and figure out why this is so important to this person, what needs to be done, what concerns they have, and we'll address them when we come back. But that's how he did it. He also revolutionizes completely the presidency's aspect with the Fifth Estate, the press. Up to that point, you were a member of the press corps. The last assignment you ever wanted was to cover the White House. You were treated like dirt. All presidents before McKinley viewed members of the press as enemies, scandal mongers, dirt throwers, and they wouldn't even let you in the building. You're a reporter, you had to stay out in all sorts of weather, all sorts of time, and try to ambush the president or his people who were coming out of the White House to fire questions at them. And sometimes there were some parts that they actually tackled people on the sidewalks to get get a hold of them so they ask them some questions or wring some answers out of them. McKinley won't have that. He has this new chief of staff, George Corley. Let me double check. Keep getting this mixed first name next time. Pardon me. me a favor, tell George, today's George.
What?
Corlew, his first name.
Wow.
Yeah. But George, Mr. Corlew, one of those brain cramps I have, I keep mixing up his first name. Mr. Corlew, he is the first White House Chief of Staff, as we know it. And one of the first things he does, he has a whole section of the White House remodeled for the press. It's the first time they're going to have a press area with typewriters and telegraph lines, lot plural, so they could all get their stories out.
It's George.
George, okay, thank you. George Corlew, George B. Corlew. And he will have regularly scheduled press conferences that he will hold. And also, he will hold press conferences that are scheduled ahead of time for the president to hold with the reporters. And he makes sure that they have food and and drink, not alcohol, lemonade, stuff like that, iced tea. This was never done before. And overnight, the press become his friends. I mean, he's treating them as human beings with respect, with professional courtesy. And now he's established what he calls the bully pulpit. Now he can use the office of the presidency to set the tone and the topics of discussion for the nation. George Corlew will also go on later and he'll start clipping articles from all the major newspapers, from California to New York, down to Florida, Texas, and he'll have them pasted into scrapbooks for the president to review every morning over breakfast. First time anybody's ever done that. And William doesn't. This is great. But it's not going to be the economy that's going to quickly overwhelm McKinley's first term. It's going to be foreign affairs. The year before, go ahead. In 1895, rebellion breaks out in Cuba. Cuba has been ruled by Spain for 403 years, and they have had enough. They tried to get their freedom in 1878 and was brutally put down. In 1895, the Cuban people rise up again. Antonio Maceo is one of their leading generals, Victoriano Weyler, Garcia, there's other. This is their war of independence. And the Spanish, again, respond brutally. They send their top-ranking general and over 100,000 troops from their army in Spain to put this rebellion down. His name is Antonio the Butcher Weyler. And he starts basically to separate the resistance, Cuban resistance fighters from the general population. He establishes concentration camps where the population will be herded into these massive camps, and they will be sorted, and basically anybody of military age, any male of military age, taken out, incarcerated, or put up against a wall and shot. No questions asked. It is a horrid, horrid war. In the United States, the newspapers get a hold of this, and the yellow press is established. William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer makes a lot of newspapers about stories about this horrid war going on just 50 miles off the shore of Florida, and the atrocities are taking place there. And and it's called the yellow press because what the newspapers would do before the main editions would come out, either early in the morning or late in the afternoon, they would have newsboys going around with the little yellow slips of paper saying, "Extra, extra! Read all about it in the next edition." Spanish troops massacre 100. Or Antonio Butcher Weyler says this, or whatever. Or Cuban rebels take, Santiago, and that's how they sold it. And people, by the time newspaper, you'd have people lined up to get these things, and that's how it got. And of course, the headlines have to be lurid and really, and they don't have to be accurate. They sent, one of the reports that's sent to Cuba is by Mr. Hearst, is a young author by the name of Stephen Crane. He gets there, and he's there about a week, and he says, "I've been here a week, there's no war." Hearst writes back, "You send me the stories, I'll provide you the war." That's the attitude. By the time William McKinley is in office, though, things are getting really bad. There's just a couple days after his inauguration, riots break out in Havana, the capital. And the American embassy, the ambassador requests a demonstration of force by the new president and the United States to demonstrate our resolve and concern. And so they send the battleship USS Maine to Havana Harbor. And it sails in, proud and majestic, and 2 days later it blows up, killing over half of the crew. That leads to war. We still don't know if it was a bomb accident. Most people today think it was a buildup of coal dust, and that caused a fire and set off one of the ship's magazines in the forward part of the ship. And now, we won't have a larger loss of life in the U.S. Navy until Pearl Harbor with the Maine. It's the splint. John Hay, our American Secretary Ambassador to Europe, to France, England, says it's a splendid little war. It lasts 100 days. Spain had no chance. It was pretty quick over. This is the war where Teddy Roosevelt leads the charge of the Rough Riders up San Juan Hill, actually it was Kettle Hill, and captures Santiago, the main port where the Spanish Navy had sought shelter. When the Spanish Navy comes out, they're destroyed by the U.S. Navy. And the main other part of the Spanish Navy that was in the Pacific and the Philippines, Admiral Dewey goes in and blows them out of the water. The Philippines surrender. We get Guam, we get Wake, we get Puerto Rico. Overnight, we have an empire. We are a world power. 100 days. And it's ended in the Treaty of Paris, 1899. We get Cuba. And the Philippines, however, will not be. Cuba will be promised. One of the conditions was it would become its own country. We would protect it for a number of years until they got elections, but it would become its own country. Philippines would be the same thing, but they would take. We're not going to give them their independence for 40 years. Cuba got it in 10. But we're not going to get it in 20, rather. Philippines aren't going to get it. They're not going to be promised their independence until 1941. And that's not going to work out either. Victorious wars are good for presidents, and Spanish-American wars no less. Again, William McKinley's renominated in the Philadelphia Convention in 1900 for a second term. Again nominated to be his Democratic opponent is William Jennings Bryan. He'll also make another whistle-stop tour. But Garrett Hobart has died. The vice president has died. He had a heart condition. In 1899, he had a massive heart attack and died in office. At the time, there was no provision in the Constitution to replace a sitting vice president. So President McKinley did not have a vice president for that last year of his first term. To replace him, Joseph G. Butler nominates Teddy Roosevelt as the new vice president, war hero. Mark Hanna was not pleased. Teddy Roosevelt was even younger than William Jennings Bryan. Teddy Roosevelt is also very much a maverick. He doesn't toe the party line. He does what he thinks is right. And to hell with anybody else, regardless of what party they may be on. And when he got out of the Army, he was made governor, he was made mayor of New York, and thoroughly angered all the New York City officials, so they kicked him upstairs to an office in the governorship. And when Joseph G. Butler nominated Teddy for vice president, I can just imagine the hallelujahs that were breaking out in Albany at the time. Marcus Alonzo Hanna, though, was not happy. He says, doesn't he understand that damn cowboy is just one heartbeat away from the Oval Office? And that has pretty much tagged the office of vice president ever since. But he's, President McKinley is overwhelmingly elected. Wider margin. Go ahead, hon. And one of the first things he does after the inauguration, he and Ida go on a national railway trip. They're going to take a page out of William Jennings Bryan's book. He's going to visit every single state in the country. First time a sitting president has ever done something like this. Then he got a special train, the chief executive special. It has its own, it has a suite for him and Ida. It has a separate suite for cabinet officials and other government officials that will join up along the way. They have a special telecommunications card that can quickly hook up to the telegraph lines wherever they may be. They have, of course, a Secret Service armed detachment car, and they have a press car, and then they have a visitor's luminary card by invitation who would come in as they go along different places. And one of the first things places they go to is Atlanta, Stone Mountain. And he extinguishes the eternal flame of the Confederacy. This is a Union war hero. And he's doing this. He says the era of the bloody shirt is over, and he gets standing ovations. They go out to California. They open. He commissions a new battleship, the Ohio, and Chinese delegation from China is giving him receiving him, giving him a thank you for his helping in the Boxer Rebellion. But while they're there, Ida has another relapse, and they have to cut short the trip, and they rush back. They don't make it to Washington. They stop in Canton at their home, so she can recover there. He was supposed to go for the 4th of July to the Pan American exhibition in Buffalo, but she hadn't recovered by that point, so they had to cancel it. They rescheduled it for Labor Day, after Labor Day weekend. And that's why William is going to Buffalo on September 5th, 1901. They have a send-off party at his house in Canton before they leave the next day for Buffalo. One of the last people to speak with him privately is Joseph G. Butler. He says, Bill, I need to talk with you for a minute. They go to the next room and he says, what's up? He says, Bill, you're entirely too free with your person. You need to be more careful. And William says, Joe, who's going to hurt me? Don't you worry too much. They go to Buffalo. They're there on September 5th. He reviews the troops. He gives this big speech at the Temple Fairgrounds. So this was like a World's Fair. And it was built in Buffalo because it was entirely electrified. Everything was lit up by electric lights, had electric tram cars, electric powered kiddie rides. I mean, this is amazing. They had spotlights at night. It was quite a phenomenon to see. It was the city of the future. And so he enjoys himself so much, he stays for a second day. And at 4 o'clock, he goes in the morning, he goes up to Niagara Falls. He goes across the bridge halfway. He doesn't want to leave the country. No sitting president has ever left the country. He doesn't want to establish a president. And in the afternoon at 4 o'clock, there's going to be a big reception, and he's going to receive visitors. And you go into the Temple of Music, the concert hall. And at 4 o'clock, the doors open, and there's over 10,000 people lined up. And it's only open, the doors are only open for about 5-6 minutes, and they said, this is nuts. They shut the doors. One of the last people they let in is this guy named William Jolgosz. He had his hand all wrapped up, his right hand wrapped up in a bandage. And he gets up to the president to shake his hand, William reaches out for his left, but Leon didn't have an injured hand, he had a pistol. And he reached out and he shot the president twice at point blank range. One of the bullets amazingly bounced off a button on his vest, and he found it in his vest pocket. The other one penetrated into his abdomen and lodged in the back. They rushed him to the hospital on the fairgrounds in a brand new electric-powered ambulance, but there was a brand new X-ray machine in the surgery, but the doctors didn't know how to work it. They did the surgery, but they couldn't get the bullet out. They got him sewed up, stopped the bleeding. They thought he was doing okay. Next day he was sitting up in bed. He was taking, clear liquids 2 days later. Teddy Roosevelt comes breaking off his vacation and sees him on the third day. And he goes back on vacation. But a few days later, he suffers a relapse and he died, September 14th, 1901. There were funerals held for the president in Buffalo, Canton, Washington, D.C., Canton, that's where he was interred. Leon Jolgas was tried for the murder of the president. His defense attorney opened the court proceedings by apologizing for having to defend him. And when he was put into the electric chair, his last words were, "I am not sorry." He was an anarchist. The anarchists were probably the most dangerous, probably the most dangerous terrorist organization in world history. They were going after the leaders of industry and politics all over the globe to set off a revolution that would overthrow capitalism and establish anarchism. And they were very good. Besides President McKinley, or very bad rather, President McKinley, they killed the Prime Minister of France, the Prime Minister of Spain, the Prime Minister of Italy, the Crown Prince of Belgium. And eventually they would kill in August of 1914, they would kill the Crown Prince to the heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary. That got us World War I. And we're still living with that. They raised funds to build a tomb for William McKinley in Canton, not far from where he lived. It was opened in 1907. Ida died just a few days before that. Ida was so grief-stricken, she never went back to Washington, D.C. She went right from Buffalo to Canton. She never came out of their home. She never went back to all of his stuff that was in the White House. It was up to George Corlew to figure out what to do with it. At the time, there was no provisions, to say, okay, this has got to go to the National Archives or Library of Congress. They didn't know what to do with it. George Corlew was one of it, and Joseph Butler helped him. And that's why we have so many McKinley artifacts in the McKinley Memorial, because Mr. Butler intervened and helped get them. But it's a chore to get them. A lot of stuff got scattered. Theodore Roosevelt would become president, served till 1908, but Joseph Butler was not happy with that tomb in Canton. He says that's not doing the job of promoting William McKinley's history and life and times. So in February 10th, 1908, he proposes to the Niles Board of Trade dinner that they build a birthplace memorial in Niles, where the little white one-room schoolhouse was. And so he goes to D.C. Joseph G. Butler could do that. He could go and see the president anytime he wanted. He had that kind of influence. And Congress had just passed legislation to create our first congressionally authorized presidential memorial, President Lincoln, in February 1910. 3 weeks later, they passed a second one to create the one in Niles. President Taft said, when Joseph Butler said, "Can we do this?" And President Taft said, "Yes, as long as Congress doesn't have to pay for it. Just, I can work, don't worry about that." And Joseph Butler, he leads a campaign to raise money for that memorial until President Bush, the first Bush's presidential memorial. That will be the only presidential memorial that was built entirely through private donations. Not one penny of taxpayer money went to build the McKinley Memorial in Niles. So if you get a chance, you got to go there. It's also the first presidential memorial that has a library, a public library built as part of it. Again, he's considered the first of the modern presidents. McKinley set a lot of new trends, a lot of new and had a whole new style of leadership in the executive mansion. So I encourage you there's a lot of stuff out there about McKinley. These are just a few of the things. But I encourage you, thank you so much for coming out today, listening, and I do have a book on McKinley, like I mentioned. So thank you all very much.
All right, thanks.